In today's show, we'll talk about how the Blazers will handle position battles and playing time on a rebuilding roster. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making the show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. The Blazers kicked off training camp 2024 on Tuesday. You're listening to Wednesday, October 2nd show. And on Tuesday, the Blazers began what is 2 weeks of two-a-day practices as they really get into it and start to sort things out and really ramp up towards the regular season. Their first preseason game doesn't start till October 11th, so they've got 10 days to play a bunch, to get out on the courts. The way from what I understand from assembled media and watching the media availability on the internet, courtesy of the Trailblazers today, what is that the Blazers kind of are planning to do some like shorter walk-through strategic, here's what we want to do stuff in the morning and then get after it and really play in the evenings. Here's what we installed in the morning. Here's what we talked about. Now let's do it at full speed. It's so hard to go full speed during the NBA season because it's relentless and there's just not enough time to like really get out there and practice. So like taking advantage of this early season when you can install stuff and then really drill it at full speed and really play and get up and down and have guys run and all of those things. This is the value of preseason. This is the value of training camp. But listening to those interviews, and particularly the interview with Chauncey Billups today, I was struck by a comment that Billups had, and I think it kind of got me thinking about what today's episode is going to be about. We're going to talk about position battles, and then we'll close the show talking a little bit about distractions. I think there's some very minor distractions that could pop up for the Blazers this year, but I want to start talking position battles because that's kind of typically what training camp is all about, right? Like, typically you go in and you say, okay, these spots are spoken for, but these 2 or maybe 3 guys are going to battle it out, right? Nazir Little versus Josh Hart to see who's going to be the starting small forward or what have you. Spoiler for the rest of this episode, I'm not sure how many true position battles the Blazers really have. We'll tease through that for the first 15 to 20 minutes of this program, but like straight up, I'm not sure the Blazers have many position battles in front of them. I think a lot of this is spoken for. But Billups had an interesting comment. I did a show on this during I believe it was last year, but it could have been the year before. I've done a lot of these shows, y'all. But I had asked kind of Will Hardy, who coaches the Jazz, and Chauncey Billups about how they kind of evaluate players during the preseason run and training camp run. And Billups at that point said that he puts a lot of stock into how they play in games because that's like the actual lights are on, rules are running. You're playing, you're running and playing with real rules. You're playing against the other team. You can't like stop and say, well, that didn't work. Let's try again. Like he said at the time, this was, I believe it was last year, that he puts a lot of stock into the actual games during preseason because like how guys playing those games are he believed to be the most valuable. But he said today that he's maybe changed his approach, or maybe he was maybe he's learned that there is to take a wider view, and year now heading into year 4. He said that he views all of this, the 2 weeks of training camp and the preseason, as sort of one entity, and all of those inputs will decide who plays, because it's not. It can't be a single thing, right? It can't just be practice, and after you finish these first 2 weeks of training camp and you get into the games and you say, okay, my decisions are made and here we go. Because, even if he mentioned that in preseason, not everyone's going to play every night. You're going to and sometimes you're going to try different things, and you're going to hold some guys back, et cetera, et cetera. But so like, he can't put all the stock into games because they're not going to be super valuable, and he can't put all the stock in the training camp because the games are going to matter too. They're all valuable data points, and his view is that over the next 3 weeks, as you ramp up to the October 23rd tip-off of Game 1 of the regular season, is that he will use all of what is available to him to judge his team, which is like the very reasonable way to do it, right? Like that is a very reasonable approach to like coach uses all information available to him to make decisions. Is like that's not exactly a headline, but I thought it was telling. And then he mentioned another thing is that he's not necessarily going to be making strong decisions. In fact, he will let the way the guys play be the guiding light of his decision making. The quote was, and this is from Blazers YouTube channel that they posted. He told assembled reporters, I was not in the building, full disclosure, but he said, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to be the one making the decision. I did transcribe it though, so I did very mild journalism. This is true aggregation at its finest. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be the one making the decision. It's the players making the decision. How well you play, that's probably how much you're going to play, or if you're going to be in the rotation, or if you're starting. I'm just the messenger on that. Players decide that. That's maybe a little too passive. Billups is usually like, he's not like a big time like BSer. He's not just like saying things to say things, but I think this is a little too passive, a little too soft. Like what I read that as more motivational. Like there are plenty of opportunities to play well, and if you play well, you can get into the rotation. I believe that, right? Because I don't believe that there is once you get past, the Blazers like first three players, the like relative quality is narrow, right? Like the gap between like how good Shaedon Sharpe actually is and how good, say, Chris Murray actually is not that wide. Like obviously Shaedon Sharpe has a lot more upside, and he's like had some games where he looks incredible, but in terms of just like overall production, the gap isn't that massive between like Jabari Walker and Toumani Camara, right? They're very similar. I think the gap between Shea and Chris Murray is actually relatively wide. I was just trying to use an example. In general, though, I think Billups, I think that's an honest appraisal from Billups, is that like he's going to watch them play, and if some dudes play so well that they absolutely need to be in the rotation, they'll pop up in the rotation because not too many things are set in stone. But I don't believe that he hasn't made some decisions. He was asked also kind of like, have you kind of thought how it fits together? He said, you're thinking about that every second of every day, right? Like that's the part of being an NBA coach. It's like you don't start doing that in September or something like that. Like you do that from the moment the season ends to when you make trades to all summer long in July to probably when you're on vacation with your family in August to like every day you just try like, how's this going to fit together, right? It's a 15-man team. It's not that tricky. But when I dial in on this, I don't really think there's position battles. I think this thing is pretty much set. That isn't to say that someone couldn't play well in the preseason and make it tricky. That's to say that I've been predicting basically the same 10 dudes are going to be the 10 dudes who play interchangeably for the 9 spots. Not interchangeably really, but 10 dudes who play basically the 9 spots every night. And then there are 4 guys out of the rotation. And then there's the 15th spot that'll come down to Banton and Devontae Graham. And then on media day, the Blazers brought out 10 players: Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, Denny Avdia, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, Toumani Camara, Matisse Thybulle, Scoot Henderson, Rob Williams, and Donovan Clingan. Those are the 10 players that I've been yelling are the ones who are in the rotation for weeks, right? As we've been previewing this since the middle of August, maybe like truly start of September, but even starting in the interview sessions on this podcast in the middle of August, those were the 9 guys, 10/10 with Rob Williams included, who I projected to be in the rotation, with Jabari Walker, Duop Reith, Chris Murray, and Ryan Rupert on the outside, along with Solano Banton. Like, those 10 dudes spoke at Media Day. I am old enough to remember last year when Kevin Knox spoke at Media Day, and it was like, why did they have Knox talk at Media Day if he's not going to make the team? And then he didn't make the team, and it was like, hey, that's weird. So I'm not going to like read too much into it, but I will say if I thought those 10 players were going to be the rotation, and then those 10 players are the only ones who speak at Media Day because the Blazers kind of just like don't want to give you guys who are ancillary to the plan. I'm reading into it a little bit. I can't help but read into it a little bit. That's what I do. The tea leaves call me. But I really don't think there's position battles to be had. I actually don't. Like, typically in training camp, that's what we talk about. Okay, here are the position battles. And I was hoping to be able to do that, right? Because this is like, I'm someone who makes content for every day of my life, seemingly most days of my life. I don't think it exists. I don't think there's position battles. I think this thing is set, and what changes is someone way outperforms expectations. Let's talk about the lack of position battles. Let's talk about what it looks like, because this is the thing that it's going to look like when we get to the start of the regular season in 3 weeks. It's going to take something pretty special to change from here we are. I don't think we're battling for much. As much as the players will dictate that, according to Chauncey Billups, he's just the messenger. Message received. There is no major dictation forthcoming, because Billups knows what you know and what I know, is that this thing is set. There's no position battles. There's basically two. And we could call it 2.5. Join me in the second segment. We'll talk about the 2.5. Join me there, won't you? First, though, I want to tell you about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, and FanDuel wants to hook it up during this NFL season. If you're an NFL fan and you're watching the quarter pole of the NFL season and excited for more of it, well, FanDuel is gonna make it more fun for you. If you're watching games, maybe you want to live bet games. Well, FanDuel has made it easier for you to follow a hunch mid-game, because if you pull up that FanDuel app, you can check out the latest stats, the latest live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you're placing your bets, all on an easy-to-use, super functional app. And right now, if you are a new FanDuel user, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you got to do is place your first $5 bet. So check out America's #1 sports book. That's FanDuel.com. All right, let's keep it rolling. So the Blazers don't have position battles like that. That's really the truth here. Here's why. I think 4 of the 5 starters are set in stone, printed right now. Anthony Simon's going to start, Denny Avdia is going to start, Jeremy Grant's going to start, and DeAndre Ayton's going to start. That is set in stone. Then I'll move. I'm a mixed medium fellow, so I'll move over from the stone, etch that bad boy, and then I'll take a Sharpie out, and I'll take like a really bright Sharpie, like a one of those off-color teal Sharpies, right? And I'm gonna write Shaedon Sharpe's name down as the 5th starter, because I think that's your 5th starter. It just makes too much sense. Plus, reading the tea leaves from Media Day, I would say when Scoot Henderson was asked whether he wanted to start or whether that was meaningful to him, his response made it sound like he was someone who knew that he was going to come off the bench and needed to have a positive mental attitude about being a bench player in year 2, despite being the number 3 overall pick, et cetera, and the situation of the team and yada, 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 right? Like, there's some smoothing to be done there. And then in another interview, I believe it was Chauncey Billups, mentioned how much that Scoot Henderson and Donovan Clingan had been playing together a whole bunch or maybe Donovan Clingan mentioned, he said he'd been playing a whole bunch with Scoot Henderson in pickup. To me, and this is like super tea leaf, and sometimes I don't walk you guys through my tea leaves because they're just dumber. They're dumb like this. To me, those are pickup games meant to get a bunch of chemistry between 2 players who are going to be in the second unit, Donovan Clingan and Scoot Henderson. I actually think getting Clingan away from Scoot is better, and having Scoot play a bunch with DeAndre Ayton could actually be more complimentary, because I think in general, Donovan Clingan is going to struggle on offense, and putting him next to Scoot, who struggled on offense, is like just a pick and roll pairing that won't work, but it's the future, right? And so you got to play them together a little bit. I think I'd rather get Scoot in there early and have him play next to DA for more functional offense. But reading those tea leaves, which are admittedly a little bit, that's weak tea right there. And just like the fit, right? Like if you were like, what's the most functional lineup? Anthony Simon, Shaedon Sharpe, Denny Avdia, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton. Both Jeremy Grant said Denny's a better rebounder than me. It's one of the best moments of Media Day. And Chauncey Billups spoke extensively about what a value that Denny's going to bring as a rebounder. They haven't had a guy rebound at that spot since Josh Hart. You know what that spot was? Your starting small forward. I don't think this isn't a lot to like. Doesn't take a brain genius to figure this out. But like, yeah, that's your group. But if that's your group, the bench is also pretty clear too. Scoot Henderson, Matisse Thybulle, Toumani Camara, I think you can put those in probably like your typical Sharpie. I would put those in black Sharpie, but nothing erasable, because those dudes are going to play. If those guys are healthy, they're going to play. Toumani Camara earned his way into the starting lineup, earned his way into the rotation in training camp last year, proof that it's possible, and then within 10 games was a starter in the NBA for half the season, basically. Bounced in and out of it because that's sort of nature of young players and a team that's kind of searching for identity. But Tumani's going to play. Matisse Thybulle, if he's healthy, is going to play. He's a Chauncey Billups favorite. Scoot Henderson's going to play. Put it in Sharpie. And then the only other question, right, is Rob Williams healthy? If Rob Williams is healthy, he's your ninth guy, and on a lot of nights, Donovan Clingan, as I mentioned on yesterday's program, is just straight up not going to play. I don't think that's a huge deal that Donovan Clingan doesn't play for, say, like the first 30 games of his rookie year, or plays very sparingly, plays like 5 minutes a night, plays one 6-7 minute first half shift and doesn't play in the second half. I don't think that's that big of a deal. But it's not ideal where the Blazers are as like an organization. They're a team that is aiming to be one of the worst teams in the Western Conference and back at the top of the draft lottery. They just drafted Donovan Clingan 7th overall, and neither of the big men in front of him look like long-term pieces of the team, and he's still not going to play. That's not ideal. I don't think it's like this major problem, but it's not that's not how you would draw it up if you could. It's certainly, to me, notably a quirk of the roster that they chose not to change or were not unable to change. But either way, they didn't change it. Unwilling, unable, uninterested, all the same outcome. Your 7th overall pick, who wasn't really like Clingan at the max this year is going to play like 20 minutes a night. Max is going to play 20 minutes a night. So it wasn't like he was going to be a big minute guy or a starter, but like 0 is a lot less, infinitely less than 20. I don't think it'll always be 0, but I think it'll often be 0. And there'll probably be nights like I would be surprised if Rob Williams is available on second nights of back-to-backs this season and stuff like that. I think they're going to be very conservative with him, and maybe they'll hold him out for some other games, and we'll see. But like, Rob Williams has been cleared to play 5-on-5. He says that he's getting close. Joe Cronin did say he's not without all restrictions, right? So you assume there is a minutes cap on how many minutes he could play. But if DeAndre Ayton's going to play 32 minutes a night, let's call it 31, right? Let's say there's 17 backup center minutes to be had. If that's probably Rob's minutes right there, those 17. If it's a little bit less, then he plays 12, and Donovan Clingan plays 5, and then you go back to DA. That's it. There's nothing that, like, unless Clingan proves in training camp and then through the first few preseason games that he's like NBA ready, which I don't think from what we saw in Summer League that he is. I think he has some NBA skills as a defender, but his offense was very far away in Summer League, and freaking the NBA preseason is a higher level than Summer League, right? Like, you're playing against NBA players for the most part. So, like, I'm just not. I'm not sure there's anything Clingan can do to earn his spot in the rotation ahead of Rob Williams. I don't think there's a position battle for the backup center spot. I think it's just a question of health. If Rob Williams is healthy, he's going to play. And I think Billups has mostly been a 9 or 9.5 rotation guy. So that's 9 players. And when I say 9.5, I mean he plays 10 in the first half and 9 in the second half. But, like, that's your 9. Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, Denny Avdia, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, Tumani Camara, Matisse Thybulle, Scoot Henderson, Rob Williams. When Rob is either unavailable or they really want to move someone or they want to play 10, it's Donovan Clingan is your 10th. I'm not sure, and certainly this is possible. I don't mean to say it's impossible, but I'm not sure there's stuff that Jabari Walker and Chris Murray and Duop Reath and Ryan Rupert could do to, like, truly leapfrog someone, right? Like, if everyone's healthy, I don't think there's position battles. I think what there actually is it gets trickier for what they want to do with the veterans. What it gets trickier for is you say, like, well, shoot, Jabari Walker can hoop. Maybe we should push to move Jeremy Grant a little bit sooner to, like, clear some space. You're not going to trade Jeremy Grant for someone who doesn't play. Likely, if you were to trade Jeremy Grant or Anthony Simons or DeAndre Ayton, like any of the vets, like, they make enough money that you're going to trade for someone back who plays. So you're still going to have a position crunch, right? I don't think there's position battles. I really don't. I don't think going into camp there is. I think the roster and the rotation is largely set. And what you're going to see is, like, some guys who are in the back half of the rotation could make it a little bit trickier. But I would be pretty surprised. I was going to say stunned, but I wouldn't be stunned. Nothing will stun me at this point. I would be pretty surprised if they could actually get into a spot where it's like Tumani Camara's minutes are in jeopardy because Chris Murray has been hooping. Certainly he could, but I don't think I don't think that happens in night one. I think that's a thing that comes up in December, right? And I think that's like, whatever, 20 games into the season, and you hit December 1st, and it's like, you know what, we got to find, like, Chris has been killing it behind the scenes, and he had a really good preseason. We got to find a way to get him in the game. Same with Jabari, same with Ryan Rupert to some extent. And Duop Reith, because he provides such a unique skill set, right? Because of, on this particular Blazer team, some NBA players can shoot, but none of the Blazers bigs have like true outside shooting chops. DeAndre Ayton just like hasn't shot 3-pointers with any volume at any point in his career. So like, maybe Reith gets into games when you need a change of pace, right? But I don't think he's going to regularly play. I don't think there's position battles. If there's one position battle on the entire roster, it's the 15th roster spot. Delano Banton, who is on a partially guaranteed deal that becomes 50% guaranteed on if he makes the opening night roster. So he's eligible. His contract is for $2.2 million. It fully guarantees for $1.1 million if he's on the opening night roster. And Devontae Graham is on a true training camp deal, an Exhibit 9 contract that's fully non-guaranteed. So like, in theory, if there is a spot on the roster that is up for true competition, it's the partially guaranteed Delano Banton versus the non-guaranteed Devontae Graham for the final spot on the roster, the 15th roster spot. I think it's Delano Banton's to lose, right? Like, I think this is a real one because Graham has been more productive in the NBA than Banton has, but he's a little bit older. His productive years are relatively far behind him, and he's a one-position player. Devontae Graham is a point guard. He's point guard sized. I guess you could play him at either guard spot because he has, in theory, some offensive juice, but like, he's point guard sized. You don't want him to be the second smallest dude on the court. You don't want to play him next to, like, you don't want to play him next to Anthony Simons or Scoot Henderson. Like, you want to play him as the one. And I think, based on what we know about Joe Cronin and the way he's built his roster over the years, the positional versatility of Delano Banton, although he has his own warts, has more value because Banton is a big point guard, although he's not really a one. But he's like, has some ball handling, pick and roll stuff to his game, but he allows you to play either big, where he plays point guard and you have like a large lineup out there, or he gives you another ball handler when you play him up at small forward, although he's a little bit skinny to play that spot, but he gives you positional versatility and some skill set versatility that they don't have. I think the Blazers are going to value that. I think it's Banton's spot to lose. Although if there is a position battle on the roster, this is it. It's Delano Banton and Devontae Graham for the final spot on the roster. Everything else, like, I don't even think there's a real playing time. Like, as much as Billups says, like, how you play will determine how much you play, I don't believe it. I believe it's been determined, and that the only thing it can do is cause a little bit more confusion. And if guys really play outside of what our expectations are, maybe I revisit this and I say, boy, back at day one of training camp, I was way the hell off. I'm comfortable being wrong. That's one of the things about talking to a microphone all the time. But I don't look at this team, and I don't look at this heading into the next couple of weeks and say, okay, here are the 2 spots on the roster or 3 spots on the roster where things like could get really interesting. Is there a world where Scoot Henderson ends up the starting guard next to Anthony Simons? Yes, but I don't think it's a very likely one. Is there a world where Devontae Graham ends up jumping into and getting the 15th roster spot? Absolutely. And I think it's more likely than the Scoot Henderson starting thing, but to me, it seems unlikely based on what we know about the Portland Trailblazers. Which brings me to the final conclusion of the show. If there's not a lot of drama with who's going to play, is there drama this season? I think there's a very mild amount, and there's a couple things I didn't mention in my media day wrap up in yesterday's program that I want to get to today, because I think there's some mild, very mild, lowercase m mild distractions for the Blazers this season. I want to address what the principal characters of those mild distractions said about those things at media day. Join me in that third segment, won't you? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Gametime. It's the place for last-minute tickets. It's the spot that rewards you for procrastinating. And you can get cheap tickets because you can get up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets, but you can also get tickets quickly on the low because Gametime has Gametime picks. They've got curation to make it easier to save more on going to sporting events, going to concerts, going to comedy, going to live theater. The curation feature works like this. You open up the app, you say, hey, recommend me a seat. Bang. They say, this is the best deal in the house. Okay, you don't like that? That's a little bit outside your price range? Bang. For the next tier down, this is the best seat in the house. Plus, I like to toggle in all-in pricing, and it is a feature that shows you upfront total cost, no surprise fees at checkout. So when you're browsing for tickets, you know exactly what you're going to get. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redemption code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. These are some leftover notes here from Media Day that I just didn't get to. I don't think they're very spicy, right? Like, I wanted to give you the like full wrap up of Media Day in yesterday's program and not stir up fake drama. In fact, like I'm knocking down fake drama in today's show. I'm like there is no positional battle. Like, this stuff is mostly decided because of the nature of the roster and not making major changes and trading for a dude who's just going to jump into the starting lineup. You know the deal. There are some distractions on the roster, and they were addressed a little bit yesterday at Media Day. One is Chauncey Billups coaching in the final year of his contract. That's not on anyone's mind other than Chauncey's. Like, certainly players might know, especially players he has a good relationship with might know, like, hey, I know my man CB's coaching the last year of his deal and I want to play well for him so he can get another opportunity. But it's a thing for us to talk about. And maybe at some point, although I would say the current Blazers media corps very unlikely to stir the pots on this particular topic during the season. But like, that's a thing, and it's real that Billups is coaching as a lame duck coach, and I would say it's pretty unlikely that he's back for another season after this, but I think that's a very mild distraction. And that's what Billups said as much. He's like, I won't and can't think about it. I don't have time to. And he's right. Like, once you might think about it when you're going to bed each night, but like in game, you can't coach for your job, because what are you going to do? I've seen people posit the idea that Billups is going to like coach to win. He's going to win too many games and to save his job. What's he going to do? Press the magic win games button? The roster is the roster. The team is the team. And the rest of the Western Conference exists. Like, if there was like a magic like win 44 games button that Chauncey Billups could press, he would have pressed it 4 years ago. Like, there is a world in which the Blazers overachieve, right? But that isn't going to be because Chauncey Billups defied the front office or some nonsense like that. It's like, that's just not a way to look. That's just a stupid way to look at it, right? Like, he's going to coach to try to win games because that's what coaches do. Players are going to play to try to win games because that's what players do. Typically, the NBA is a meritocracy. It is a freaking talent league, and if you have enough talent, you can win, and if you don't have enough talent, you won't win. And the Blazers will probably have enough talent to be a little better than they were last season. I think that's pretty obvious, assuming some good health and those things. But the Western Conference is extremely talented, and they're going to be even if they overachieve, at the bottom still. Like, let's be honest about it. There isn't a magic jump into 7th place in the West button that Chauncey Billups is going to hit. So he's not going to coach for his job. He's not going to be in this position where it's like, oh, I wanted to win. I wanted us to be a playoff team, but they wouldn't let me. It's just not going to happen. And if they are like a little bit better than they're supposed to be, this team will shamelessly lose. And that won't be a thing on Billups. Like, some people say like, oh, the only reason you want to, that Billups is like on the hot seat is because they've lost. No. I mean, that's certainly part of it, particularly his first 2 years, is that they just like weren't ever good. But like, it's the lack of creativity. It's the lack of, putting guys in their best spots to succeed, kind of misusing some guys and figure that stuff out. It's like, it's basketball stuff. It's like, it's that Billups was brought in to coach a completely different roster and spoke very candidly and openly on it on multiple podcasts this summer about how he didn't sign up to coach a rebuilding team, but here he is. That's why he's not going to be there. But that's not going to be a distraction. That's not going to be a distraction. Like, that's just going to be a reality, right? I think that's going to be a reality. He will be coaching. He won't even be coaching for his job. He'll just be coaching the last season of his tenure. And if he clearly has improved dramatically as a coach, it'll be obvious outside of the win-loss stuff. Like, obviously they'll win some games if he improves as a coach, but like, if they play with more purpose, and the offense looks like it has much more of a like cohesive plan, and they have a strong identity on both sides of the ball. I think their identity on defense was fine. I think Billups is a totally competent defensive coach. But like if the offense looks significantly better, right? Like then the conversations about Billups will change. But the win-loss stuff were really, really like I don't think he can do much to impact it in the grand scheme of things, and then that's really not how he's being judged anyways. The team wants to lose. The other distractions are the trades for the veterans. Anthony Simons had a really good response to it. Basically said like, I simply can't. Like I can't think about it. Obviously it's there. He heard it. He knows like he's like dude has access to the internet, but like he's here and he's not going to focus on it because what could he do? Like what good does that do him? How does that help? He's like, I'm on the Blazers. What I'm going to do is focus on being Anthony Simons at his peak. And it's like he had an interesting comment or interesting response when someone asked him like what he worked on. And he was like, he didn't say the D word, right? He didn't want to say defense, but he's like, y'all know what I'm bad at. It's obvious. Like the stuff I need to improve at, it's obvious what I need to get better at. And like that's his focus is just like he's not going to make the pledge. I'm going to get way better on defense. He's not going to make the pledge that I'm going to like I really want to be here, because he might not really want to be here. What he knows is that he's here now, and if he plays his best, it'll set himself up for success. He mentioned it. Like the Blazers gave him a nice contract. They offered him $100 million. At the time, it seemed like a bunch. Now it seems like a totally reasonable deal. And you play it out. You do your best, and then the opportunities come. And same with Jeremy Grant. He said he's had open, transparent conversations with Joe Cronin. He declined to discuss the details of those open, transparent conversations, but it's obvious. He said, like, yeah, you might get traded, and I'll make sure you have a heads up, and I'll try to send you to a place that makes the most sense, but I'm going to do both sides got to win, and if I can find a way for the Trailblazers to win and to send you to a nice place that you want to play and helps them, great. That's the ideal outcome, right? Like that's what it wants. That's like without knowing anything, that's clearly what the transparent conversations were about. Yes, you might get traded. No, I'm not going to normal you. The end. None of these are real distractions. The Blazers are relatively drama-free right now. There will be stuff that happens. There'll actually be stuff that happens that we just never know about and behind the scenes, and hopefully we'll get some good reporting about it. We'll see. But like, I think for the most part, there's no position battles and there's no real distractions heading into camp. This is a low drama, kind of low stakes season. It doesn't mean that it can't be fun and interesting and fascinating, and I'll try my best to make it such throughout the year, but I'm not going to sell you on day one of training camp. Here are all the hot news you need to know. I'm going to keep it real with you. That's what I try to do on this podcast. I think we know what the rotation is going to look like, and I think even the things that are distractions, hanging dark clouds, little black rain clouds, shout out to Winnie the Pooh, shout out to all my cartoon heads, Garfield and Winnie the Pooh. The little black rain clouds floating above the honey tree, like those are just, I don't think they are actually big deals. Like I think they're merely Winnie the Pooh in disguise. Come back for tomorrow's show. We do this 5 days a week wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. Tell your friends about the program. I'll talk to you soon.